Welcome to Selling in the Age of AI.
Yeah, this is good stuff. So,
Must-listen podcast for sales professionals who lean into technology without leaning on it. Dive into the future of sales with your host, the dynamic and inspiring Frank Somma, renowned keynote speaker, best-selling author, seminar leader, and business coach. Get ready for game-changing insights and strategies that value technology but place humanity at the top of the sales pyramid.
Benvenuti a tutti. Welcome everyone to Selling in the Age of AI, the podcast where we respect the tech but place human-to-human contact squarely at the top of the sales pyramid. I'm Frank Somma, and today I am blessed to have the amazing Shawn Casemore. I met Shawn in an online meeting and was so impressed we peeled off and met separately on our own. Shawn's knowledge of the selling process is extensive, and his ability to present it is among the best out there. Shawn's a professional speaker, sales trainer, consultant, and advertiser. He is the owner and founder of Casemore and Company, Inc., a global and consulting firm, and has worked with organizations such as NGK, Bosch, Tim Hortons, love that coffee, PepsiCo, MNP Bank of Montreal, and over 200 other leading organizations. Each year, Shawn speaks to dozens of conferences, events, sales kickoff meetings, helping sales and organizations adopt new skills and sell in today's economy. Shawn's publishing includes hundreds of articles in print and online, and he's written 6 commercially published books, 6 books, including his most recent, The Unstoppable Sales Machine, The Unstoppable Sales Team, and The Sales Multiplier Formula in 2025. We'll have Shawn's website and how to reach out to him in the show notes. Welcome, Shawn. I'm so thrilled you could be here today.
yeah, well, thanks for having me, Frank. I was thinking about in your intro, I think we spent a lot of time supporting one another in 2020. I won't say why that is. I think everybody knows. But when you're speaking and training and doing a lot of work in person and suddenly you're not, we would console one another and strategize about the future, not only for ourselves, but for sales professionals who are facing a lot of the same challenges, not being able to get meetings and get in person. So
yeah, for sure. So Shawn, in your business, what's the breakup in terms of how much is speaking at kickoffs and to sales teams and conferences, and how much is taking sales teams, coaching, and things like that?
I'll be honest with you, it changes year by year because it really depends on the companies I'm working with. So generally speaking, I would say 40% of my time is speaking at events, association events, sales kickoff meetings. Probably the next 40% of that is some sort of training work, development work, which I would include both, formal training as we know it, virtual, as well as coaching in that. And the last 20%, if I did my math correctly, is more consulting, which is specifically just developing sales strategies, expansion strategies, new territories, new countries, that kind of thing. So,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And when you look at what's happening in the selling world today, with the advent of so much point-and-click technology, why should salespeople still feel like there's a place for us?
Well, look, I still, and I was discussing this with somebody this morning, I'll say a potential client, we haven't got there yet, but one of the things we discussed is the fact that we're still focusing on building relationships. And if you read a lot of the studies, and I won't call any out specifically, but the idea that technology is taking over the sales role, right? It's becoming a huge contributor. And the reason why is the people we're selling to, regardless of industry, sector, B2B, B2C, they're all getting on their phone, going to Google, going to ChatGPT, going to Claude.ai, going wherever, and that's how they're researching. But what we have to realize is that initial research is how they find us. But once they find us, there's still got to be an interaction. There's still going to be a conversation. And what studies have found, I think it was in the LinkedIn study a couple of years ago, that talked about trusted advisor. And it said that there's so much research people are doing, and of course, so much information out there. It's hard to know what's accurate, what's not, what's valid, what's not. So sales professionals, the role has really shifted to being more that trusted advisor, whereby when you're building the relationship of trust, you're helping the people understand what information applies to them, how it's helpful to them, etc. So if you get away from the pitch, which when people tell me, oh, I'm just going to go into a pitch, I'm like, oh, please don't do that. Ask solid questions, understand the prospect, and then make suggestions and recommendations. Act as the trusted advisor you are. I think that's really the shift that's happening. And technology, again, just becomes a tool and an aid more so than the conversation, the interaction itself.
Yeah, sure. Why do you think it's so difficult, or do you find that it's difficult for salespeople to ask more than they tell?
I, I've given that a little bit of thought, but I haven't prepared an answer, Frank, but I'll give you my honest feedback. And I'll include myself in this. I've been in sales and I've sold everything from widgets to memberships. I've sold air. And that's what I always consider memberships. I'm selling you a promise of something you can't see right now, but also tangible goods. I think part of it's nerves. I think anybody, even if you're really good at sales, if you get in front of somebody you don't know, you want to impress them, you want to build a relationship. Nerves, at least for me and many of the coaching or coachees, I guess, or mentorees that I work with, it elevates your energy, and therefore you can come off a little enthusiastic. What's the result of that? You talk a lot. So you've got to realize that it's normal to be nervous. But what I find is if you go in with some good open-ended questions and you train yourself to slow down, take pauses when you ask a question, don't fill that void, ask a question, and then sit there. And I tell, when I'm doing training, I often say the first person that speaks loses after you ask a question. Just sit there and listen. And that information can then inform where you take that conversation. So when you realize the benefit of asking questions and staying silent to hear the answer, and you realize it's nerves that is probably driving you in many cases to talk a lot, I think just that realization helps you realize, okay, well, I can control my nerves. I can control the environment. I can pause. I've even told, I did some work with a large company globally that won't tell you what they distribute because it might give it away. But nonetheless, we were talking about the interactions with buyers and in the meetings. And I said, a trick I've used for years, and I know many other people that do it, is when you ask a question and you pause, you count. 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. And I've found over 15 years that within 3, 1,000, 98% of the time they will say something. It's rare that they don't. And if they don't, I can just rephrase the question. But you have to find these tips and tricks and ways, if you know that you do want to fill that void, just to slow yourself down a bit.
Yeah, it's important. I think that people do business with people they like, and people do business with people they trust, as you said, becoming a trusted advisor. And if you think about people that you really like and you really trust, they probably listen to you well and make you feel good about yourself.
Yeah. And if there's and I'm trying to come up with a new way to say this because we've all heard this before, but if I said to you, you have to provide value. Right? Give your prospects value. And everybody that's been around sales nods and says, yeah. And you say, well, what is value to your prospect? And a lot of people kind of scratch their head. But value is information, it's ideas. If you're selling something, you've probably had far more experience with that thing that you're selling than the person on the other side of the table. So just because they're asking questions, just because they're in a position of authority, you have to recognize you bring probably more to the table than they do. They probably need you more than them, although that might seem counterintuitive. So have confidence in your knowledge, in your background, in the team that you can bring in if necessary. And when you build that confidence, you're just in a better position to build trust because people won't see you as somebody that just does a pitch, which is probably what all of your competitors are doing. So, and your book, I mean, the whole concept of B2B is really P2P. I mean, we still are selling to people. They might be behind a screen, they might be behind a piece of technology, but there's still somebody back there somewhere. In most cases, we're not yet selling to computers.
No, that's the truth. And remembering that, when you become a person that wants to go and pitch, or you're busy selling instead of asking and supplying solutions, really,
Yeah.
you're going to wind up competing at the bottom of the heap on price. And when I hear salespeople complaining about competing on price, I go back to, you said, is there a better way to say, did you bring value? And that value is, hey, Shawn, this piece of technology that you've already Googled and ChatGPT'd and Claude AI'd and know probably as much about it as I do, let me tell you how it worked in a company similar to yours. That's what I'm bringing. And the fact that I'm trustworthy. So how do I become trustworthy? Well, I do what I said I was going to do when I said I was going to do it. Yeah. If I am reliable and personable, and again, it's really about asking a lot of questions and using those questions to further the process. Do you teach some of that in your, when you're out doing training? Do you teach folks how to ask questions that move things along?
Yeah, what I've been focused on the last several years, because as you know, when you do train teams, I mean, it's as much a learning environment for myself because I'm coming in with what I know works, but in every group you learn new things, new ideas.
Yeah.
I will tell you one quick story if you remind me about a salesperson that used AI. If you remind me about that, I'll tell you a story on that here if we have time. But when it comes to those training environments, what I tend to do is I take everybody in the room and I have them share different examples and scenarios, right, that they've used where they believe they've brought value and how they know that it was actually valuable. And we use different methods to get to that. But it is leading with ideas, information, concepts, tools, resources, tips, connections with others, right? All that stuff can be helpful. And so when I'm training, I'm having them come up with a list of what they believe is valuable. I have them vetted amongst each other. Then I have them categorize it. Wow. And I say, okay, what is competitive value? Meaning I provide it and probably my competitor does too. What is unique or distinct value? Meaning, distinct is something that not too many people provide and unique is something that nobody else can provide. And when we go through the exercise, I often come back at the end and say, so what do you have in the unique category? Rarely there's much there. And then I say this, you're unique. Right, what you, Frank, bring to that meeting.
I'm sorry, I had to write that down.
Yeah, what you bring to the meeting is unique because there's nobody like you. So it's trying to help those when we're doing training understand how to pursue different methods and approaches, but specific to value. What is value? How is it tangible? How do you know it's valuable? And then categorizing it because we always want to lead with something that's different. Because to your earlier point, if the experience that a buyer or a prospect has with me selling them a widget is the same as the experience with you selling them. We both dress similar. We ask similar questions. Both have a brown briefcase. Both show up and have a in-person meeting. When they go to make the decision to buy, how do they make the decision? Because everything else is the same. They look at price. So if you want to not have price be the focus, you have to focus on the experience you're providing as the sales professional to that prospect because it's got to be unique and different right from the start so that when it comes to price, if you're a little bit more, they say, well, it's probably worth a little bit more because Shawn did this and Shawn provided that and Shawn, right? And so it's that I've been talking a lot about shifting the concept or the idea to prospect experience in order to differentiate. And part of that is asking good questions. I talk about provocation. I've got a model that we use to be more provocative in your questions because there's a chance your questions sound the same as everybody else's questions. So
tell me about being provocative in your questioning. I like that. That's actually provocative.
Yeah, well, see, so here's what I typically say because it does take effort. And by the way, I will say that the idea of provocative selling is not my idea. The concept's been around a while. There's content on it, essentially, publications and such on it. So I'm not going to take credit for that concept. But what I do is I've got a model that I incorporate provocation into. And the way you begin is, so if I'm going to sell you paper, I can go in and I can talk about the paper, where the paper comes from, how great our paper is, how many customers we sell to, blah, blah, blah. That's what everybody else that sells paper would talk about. Mm-hmm. But I could come in and be a little bit more provocative. So, for example, you say to me, well, Shawn, thanks for meeting with me today. We're here to talk about your paper. What can you bring to the table? Or how much is your paper? Why is it any better than the paper I get? I could try and prove why it's better, or I could say something that gets you scratching your head a bit. So, for example, a provocative statement might be, well, I'm not really here to talk about paper. Notice the pause, and you would say, well, like, what are you here for then? Like, why are you here? I say, well, I'm here to learn more about your business to see if the paper we provide or can supply is a good fit for you and can improve. So I guess I would take your question and pose it back to you. Are there current situations where you believe a different quality of paper sourced from different areas or whatever, I'm not a paper expert, would be more beneficial to your company? So sometimes provocation is just taking the typical question you would ask and flipping it, or taking the point and flipping it. But I find you have to say it out loud to see if it really works. But again, the goal, the objective of provocation is to get the person we're trying to sell to stop for a moment. And we're really trying to reposition the challenge, the problem, the opportunity that they have. So that's why I think it's key, because again, then provocation becomes part of differentiating that experience.
So two things there. One is, to my podcast team, make sure that you clip that out, because that was a masterclass in selling. Asking, I'm not here to sell you paper, is just a wonderful statement. The other thing, though, that it reminds me of, I'm an NLP graduate, and it's what we call pattern interrupts.
Yes.
So back in the day, we would teach people to call and say things that are unexpected, right? The receptionist is used to hearing all day long, hey, this is Shawn Casemore, I'm selling paper. Hey, this is Shawn Casemore, who buys your paper? Hey, this is Shawn, who's your office manager? So, we would teach them pattern interrupts and to say something provocative, I guess.
Exactly. That's exactly
on
it.
the phone, when somebody answers the phone, talk about, wow, I've never heard anybody say that when they answer the phone. Oh, do you have to say that on every call? Boy, that was a mouthful. Saying something that's unexpected to kind of get the conversation going another way, yeah?
Yeah, and I can give you a different example, because I was just asked to try this. So I spoke late last week, and there's a gentleman there. They sell, let's say, heating systems for buildings, right? HVAC type stuff. And he said, well, how am I going to talk about, what's my provocative point? And I say, well, would you agree that when you go in to speak with a prospect, you're going to talk about all the good things your HVAC. So it's longevity, it's temperature control, it's ease of use, it's all. He says, absolutely. I said, well, maybe, again, flip that around. So you go in and you say to the prospect, well, look, you're probably here today. You want to talk about my HVAC system and how it's different. And, they're going to say, yeah, sure, go ahead. And you say, well, let me ask you this. I'm not even sure if you need an HVAC system. Right. So the point of provocation comes from exactly what you said, Frank, which is, in my book, The Unstoppable Sales Machine, I talked about pattern interrupts. But I wrote that book in 2021. It was published in 22. And I found, when I was doing training for companies to implement the system, people, they got lost on the pattern interrupt. Like, it just didn't land as well. And when I started saying, well, the goal here is to be provocative, to get their attention and keep their attention. The goal is to stand out as somebody, as a sales professional that they remember. And here's the steps to get there. That landed. And that became, people seem to be able to accept that and apply it more so than me saying pattern interrupts. So the evolution of pattern interrupts is provocation. So you're exactly right.
So, what I'm understanding from you is, I want to focus on the prospect's experience, and that happens when I am trustworthy. So I use the word charismatic a lot.
Yeah.
And which to me incorporates, somebody who is reliable, somebody that you don't mind seeing, that you welcome a phone call from. What makes somebody charismatic? What do you think are the components, and how could we teach folks to up their charisma quotient?
So, and again, I haven't prepared anything on this, so I'll go off the top of my head. My initial response is that not everybody can be charismatic easily. So it will take more effort for some people than others, just based on your behavioral style and all of those things. But charismatic to me is how you show up. So it's your level of energy, enthusiasm, interest in what you're speaking about, interest in the prospect, but that has to align with the environment. So if you're an engineer and I meet you in a room that's painted gray, there's no windows, the door's closed, and you say, hello, Shawn. I don't go and go, hey, Frank, good to see you, man, because that's just not going to go well. But I might say, hey, Frank, good to see you. Really appreciate the environment. And I'm noticing this is a serious conversation, so I want to get right to the point. So charismatic to me is really tuning into the other person or people and adjusting how you come across, language, voice, how you show up in a way that gets their attention and makes you interesting in their mind. But notice, you can't just pick a level and use it all the time. You're always adjusting it to the other person.
Shawn, I wrote a blog post about this. I'm going to say it was 2-3 weeks ago. Deb and I were in a Costco, and there was a woman who had one speed. And it was so obviously ineffective. And it was this idea of understanding, matching pace and tone, because you can lead folks to a place that's more comfortable with you. But first, you've got to meet people where they are. And you just said that so well that, if I come into an engineer who's going to give me a somber greeting, I can't be Richard Simmons.
Yeah,
I'm probably dating myself with that reference.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do people know who Richard Simmons is?
Yeah, there might be somebody who's, more modern take on somebody who's filled with enthusiasm. But, the bottom line is you've got to match people, meet them where they are so that they become comfortable with you. And I think that's a great call on your part. To build your charisma quotient, some of the things you're going to want to do is ask more questions. Like I used to say, if you had one of those chess clocks that you hit every time, when they play chess on the benches in Manhattan, they hit the clock because the time, how much time you take to move counts in the win of the game. And if you had one of those with your prospect, you want to aim for like a 45-15. You want to get them talking more than you. And I think one of the things that salespeople miss sometimes is this idea, like if you watch these legal shows and the guy just constantly jumps up, I object, leading the witness, Your Honor. Well, that's what we do.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful form of questioning that it's against the law.
Yeah.
So use this, and I don't mean use it in a way that's inauthentic. It's super important. Always be who you are, because in the end, more today than ever, you're gonna live or die by who you are. Yeah. So keep that authenticity, but ask questions that lead to the next thing that you want to go to, right? I don't want to say, like if you were talking before about a membership, I don't want to say, hey, Shawn, do you need a membership? Yeah. That's going to be a yes or no question. I want to open up the possibility and ask a question that's more open-ended than that. So, Shawn, how did you find out about our memberships? Hey, Shawn, what led you to us today? I want to ask more open questions.
Yeah, and the more it's funny. Early in my sales career, I'm trying to think of the first thing I sold. I think they were widgets from a manufacturer. And so what I found with questions when I did it, it would sometimes feel uncomfortable. It'd feel like I'm almost interrogating them. But the weird thing would be in my head, I'm like, okay, I've got a few more questions here. They're probably going to pick up on what I'm doing. And I would even acknowledge that. I'd say, look, Frank, I don't want you to think I'm interrogating you. I just have a few more questions. But invariably, everybody said, yeah, no problem. Because people love talking about themselves. People love talking in general, as long as it's about something they know, which is them. And the more you can get them talking, the weird thing is, the more they appreciate you. Like I had somebody once at the end of a conversation where I asked a lot of questions. They said, well, Shawn, this has been a great discussion. And I'm thinking, it was asked question. But I said, well, yeah, I thought it was real. I learned a lot. And I think I've got enough here that we can have another deeper conversation about how there might be some alignment. So, yeah, it's interesting that questions, and to your point, when used strategically, you might know what you want to say, but if you can ask a question to get them to say something that then heads you in that direction, that's when you know you got them, because that is persuasion at its best.
Yeah, that's an important thing, is to use questions wisely. And to your point, Shawn, you can't come off like you're interrogating someone.
No. But you might feel like it. But as long as
but that's us being in our own heads again.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a guy on the show, Mike Reddington. He's a certified forensic interrogator. So he really does interrogate people.
Yeah.
But this guy is just brilliant. I read his book, was a lesson. I mean, it was just so good. But talked about asking different questions. And one of the funny things, we were talking about being authentic. And one of the stories that I really enjoyed is he was talking to a prospect, and they went through the process. He asked all those questions, kept going, asking. And at the end, as he was walking out, he said, by the way, I noticed that you have a model of a Corvette on your top shelf. I didn't get the sense of you being like a vet guy. What's up with that? He said, that's my sales trap. And Mike's like, what? He's like, oh yeah. When somebody walks in the office and the first thing they do is go, oh, you like Corvettes? I have a Corvette. I throw them out.
Yeah, that was the old school. Used to be find a picture, find something in the room, and then acknowledge it. But I've had, I think once very early in my career, in my 20s, I went into the HR office or office of an HR, and there was a picture there, and it was of young children. So I said something to her, and again, so long ago, but I said something. But are those your daughters? And she said, no, they're my nieces. And I thought, oh, okay. And I said, oh, okay. Like it was just, it felt hard to recover from. And then I wasn't sure, can she not have children?
Right.
Why did I even ask this
Should I
question?
ask? Do you
Oh
have
my
any of your
gosh.
own?
And then that's going on in your head. Meanwhile, I should be focused on the conversation we're having. So yeah, I've tried to really zone in on the person more so than the environment, but the environment gives clues to the person.
Yeah.
Go in, there's lots of pictures
I
of family.
think,
Kids,
Sean,
like
keeping in mind that, as you were saying before, the stereotype that the media has put out there for us is not good.
no.
And I spend a lot of my time when I'm seeing a prospect in any way, shape, or form, I am very focused on this is who I am and this is what I'm bringing. I'm asking you questions to understand what it is you're looking for. And if I don't feel like I'm a fit, I'm going to say that early.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like, this is something that works within my model, but I do know some folks I can recommend to you. But it's you can't be all things to all people, and I believe that when you are inauthentic in any way, it will come back to bite you. And today's environment, with the ability for everyone to just get online and find out virtually anything, including about you and whatever you've claimed or said, you've got to be absolutely on point with that.
And I, you something that I think we can both go back to when we were our younger days, and it was always about the used car salesman. Everybody would use that term. Oh, I don't want to feel like a used car salesman.
Right.
Well, I sold used cars and new cars. I don't think I'm that way. But today, I don't think we help ourselves, because how many cold, irrelevant emails and social media messages do you get in a day, pitching you stuff that has nothing to do with you? Some of them very formal, well-written emails. People trying to sell me a list of CIOs. Well, what makes you think I want a list like that? Like just. And there's actually a group I belong to, of professional speakers, where we sometimes share back these ridiculous pitch emails. We take all the personal stuff out of it, but it just, I don't think we're helping ourselves when we do that. But the good news is, if you're in sales and that's not your approach, ask yourself, well, if that's not what I'm going to do, if I'm not going to blast out a bunch of emails that are irrelevant to people, what could I do that sets me apart from those people? How can I use that as a trigger to be different, to provide that different experience, to be more provocative? Because I think it's easier than ever to stand out in a sea of sameness in sales, if I can say that, because everybody's trying to do the same stuff. They're using sales techniques that were taught 20 years ago that are still being taught today. They're using tools like email, just to try and do everything for them to make their life easier. I mean, sales is about conversations and interactions and discussions. That might be email, might be text, might be in person. It's not blasting out a bunch of stuff to people, hoping they'll bite. I mean, the average return on a well-scripted marketing email going out to people trying to sell something is like 2% reply rate, not sales rate. So it's just, we can't, we're not helping ourselves. And certainly, I guess what I want to suggest to those listening is it's even easier than ever before to stand apart, to set yourself apart. But don't fall into the trap of doing those things that everybody else does, because typically they're not working. So,
and it feels like that's the separation when we began our conversation, professional salespeople then, right? So I can, if I want to be replaced by AI, I should approach my sales job by sending out huge amount of email blasts every day. And when I get a whiff of interest, following it up with tons of information, again, through the same medium.
yeah,
And I will wind up at the bottom of the heap competing on price against machines,
yeah,
right? Because everything that you're doing there, a machine can do for you.
exactly.
So what's the point of you, right? I think that is the separation, Sean, what you're saying about being different.
It is. And what I was going to mention to you earlier, that example, I did some work with a sales team about a year ago, pretty large team. So I interviewed a bunch of folks, as I often do before I do any work, just to get a sense of their environment and what's going on. And one gentleman said to me, he uses AI for everything was what he said. And so I picked up on his answer. I said, well, what do you mean everything? He says, well, my sales presentations, I use AI. My sales emails I send out, I use AI. My responses, I use AI. I said, okay. So I asked a few more questions, but here was the funny part and the reason I share this example with you. He was the lowest performer of the entire team, had the lowest results, like of anybody by far. And the person, there was two people that were just killing it. We're doing amazing results, great sales. You know what they focused on? Relationships. They took existing relationships, they built on those, they got referrals, they met with people in person. AI, they weren't even sure how to use it. Now, that's not a good thing either, because AI can be a great tool to help organize and structure, just like the meeting notes that are being taken from this conversation. It's a great admin helper, but it does not replace the human being when you're selling. It's just not possible. And if you let it, it will replace you, to your point.
So when you see people that are good with relationships, how are they using technology to assist them? Can you think of some ways that the tech helps?
100%. So the people that are good at relationships are good at them because they focus on relationships. But the reality is, and if you go back to our days of selling, a good day would be 5 in-person meetings. If you could have a cluster of meetings in one area, you could maybe squeeze in 6 if you didn't have lunch, but 5 was pretty realistic. Yeah. So what those people that are focused on relationships are doing, because their days are pretty full of virtual and or in-person meetings, is they're using it to help them administratively. They're using it to help them with trip notes that you will need to put into your CRM system. They're using it to take notes and identify actions, right, from their meetings rather than them have to type it out. So they're using it almost as their administrative assistant, right, rather than something doing the work for them, because they recognize the relationships come from me. But if I can save time by having this admin stuff handled by something else that can probably structure it better, it's more organized, etc., it's only going to free up more of my time to have more relationships, right? So
now, as you look down the road, I'll ask you to get your prognosticator hat on. Looking out 5 years, 10 years, and seeing how quickly things have been changing on us. Do you have a sense of, what our roles will be as salespeople? What do you see changing, do you think, going down the road 5 or 10 years?
I mean, obviously, technology continues to evolve, and I'm not I'm not at the forefront of technology, right, such as like Sam Richter, right? That's his focus, and he's got a lot of great ideas there. Right. I think what we'll see happen is that if you think about sales across all companies, so very general, there are sales roles that are pretty basic, and that essentially could probably be handled by marketing doing some things along with some technology. I think you'll see those basic, low contribution sales roles become more of a marketing / technology role. Right. But what that will do is elevate those where a person is needed, a relationship is needed. So we'll have more people able to focus on those relationships. So I guess to say that differently, because I don't know if that comes off clearly, those that enjoy sales and are good at sales will continue to elevate themselves. They'll be more recognized. As a result, they'll probably get better compensation. They'll get paid better for the work they do. Mm-hmm. And technology will start to handle more of the low end. Could be some of the inside sales stuff that just doesn't need a person doing it. I also think technology is actually going to influence and is influencing marketing far more than it's influencing sales.
So if you could give some advice to new salespeople starting today, yeah, what are a couple of great pieces of advice that you can offer to somebody getting going now?
I would say if you're choosing a role in sales, choose a sector, industry, company that you foresee that it is still very much there's a relationship to be had. To give a tangible example, if you're selling widgets, you can still argue, depending on who you're selling them to, that there's a need for a relationship, but there's more risk there, right, than there is selling a life insurance policy, which, as much as that's being commercialized, it's being done far more effectively by people, right? So if you take a look at the roles that are out there today, the sectors that are out there, and just draw some conclusions where long-term there's always going to need to be a trusted relationship here. And if that's something you enjoy doing, that's the sector, the role, the company I would be pursuing. Secondly, you always be investigating technology as your friend, right? How can I use this tech to help me? Yes, it might require you spend $25 a month of your own money in some cases to test something. But if you can free up more of your time to be more focused on the relationship and the interactions, you'll be far more effective as a salesperson. Back in our days, Frank, the top salespeople in any company had a secretary because the owner of the company just wanted them to go out and sell because they were good at it. So send all your admin to whomever, right? Could be a man or woman. AI can be that administrative support if you use it in that manner. So you've always got to be testing tech to see how can it help me to free up more of my time to sell. And I guess the last thing I would suggest is this, that I often tell my clients, if you've tried to hire somebody that is in some sort of trade, and most people find that difficult, try hiring a good salesperson. I'd say it's one of the hardest hires to make. Finding great salespeople is becoming more and more difficult, I believe. So, if that's something you enjoy doing, I think the opportunities will always be there because there just seems to be fewer and fewer people. I heard something like 70,000 sales vacancies in Canada alone a few years ago. I don't know if that's even relevant, but I did look up, and I won't quote it because I'll be wrong here, but there are tens of thousands of vacancies across North America, specifically in the US, for sales right now. So there's always going to be an opportunity, but position yourself that you can see the long term will be my suggestion.
So looking at all those vacancies and understanding, if we have any belief in the Pareto law and say, the 80-20 thing, the top 20%, what is it you think those sales folks, and I know we're going to say relationship, but is there anything else we can drill down on that will help me to say, I'd like to be the best of the best? What other components do you see in the best of the best?
Be strategic about who you go after.
Okay.
Too many salespeople put the same amount of energy and attention into a poor prospect as they do a good prospect. And what I mean by poor is, I was taught this a long time ago, as I'm sure you were. Sometimes it takes as much energy and effort to close a small account or to close a small customer as it does a big one. So why not put your energy and effort into the bigger fish, the bigger whale? You still should have some smaller ones to fill the voids,
Right.
but don't chase bad prospects. Make sure if you win the business, it's going to be sufficient. I'm coaching somebody right now that is just overwhelmed with the amount of effort and work. And she said to me, Shawn, I don't know how you could help me, right? Like I'm doing well, but I'm just swamped. And I said, well, that's where we begin. Because the second thing I would suggest along the same lines is top performing sales professionals are always asking themselves, how can I improve my production and reduce my labor intensity? So again, it's taking a look at what you're doing and always asking yourself, it's kind of the stop, start, continue. What's working that I want to keep doing? What's not working that I want to stop? And what have I thought that I maybe should start here that's going to help me? And you're constantly going through that evolution to move yourself up to focus on higher value activities, which create better results for you and shed some of that busy work that doesn't get you anywhere.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, spending the lion's share of my time building the relationships, getting rid of the labor-intensive stuff, and moving upstream. A step further is not just that it takes the same effort to close a little deal as it does a big one, but in my experience, the small deals actually become more problematic. It's almost like it's small to me, but it's big to them, and they have more focus on it, and it becomes like more of a time suck than a larger deal. I don't know. That's been my experience.
No, I agree. And depending on who's listening to this, you might be selling to small businesses and say, well, look, Shawn, who else can I sell to? That's why I'm saying be strategic. Take a look at who you're selling to and take your market that you're pursuing and ask yourself, who are the high value to you potential customers or clients that you believe will be lower effort? And that's who you pursue first.
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, you could be selling ads to the local pizzerias and dry cleaners. I'm not saying that you've got to be selling to Google and Amazon, but like you said, be strategic about that approach and what are the best. You can tell a lot by being in person. Get out there and see people. And the other thing too with salespeople is that when you figure out these ways to free up the time, then you've got to be very deliberate about how you're going to use that time, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Be strategic, be deliberate, be intentional.
Yeah.
Is often what I try to say with your time and who you pursue and where you spend that time. Time is something none of us get more of, so use it wisely.
Yeah, I mean, that goes into, I work with a sales team now that my biggest focus with them from the beginning was planning.
Yep.
It makes me out of my brain to watch somebody show up on Monday morning and go, okay, open email, what are we going to do today?
Let email guide my day.
You got it. What do you want to get done is very important. That a very, very old expression, never start a day until it's done on paper.
Yeah.
Shawn, so much packed in, so much wisdom. Is there anything that I didn't ask you about that I should have asked you about? Anything that you want to touch on before I get to my final wrap up here?
No, I think it's been a great conversation. Good to reconnect. I will. One thing I will mention is my next book, The Unstoppable Sales Prospecting System,
Nice.
is going to be out in November. So for those looking for that as a resource, and it'll be available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all those great things.
Busy guy. A lot of
Yeah.
books.
Yeah, well, I've got the next one. If there's a publisher out there looking for an author, I've got the next one ready, and I'm pursuing publishers right now. So
That's fantastic. Wow, that's great to know. So, Shawn, my final question to everybody is, in the world of charity, giving back, are there particular charities that you've worked with, work for, help out, or just want to give a shout out to?
yeah, so one I did some work with many years ago. There was two organizations, Kids Help Phone, which is a not-for-profit that supports kids in need, provides them a phone number, and as well as texting and online support. And Big Brothers Big Sisters is also an organization I've just donated my time and energy to support. I was fortunate growing up. I had a good upbringing. My parents, I was an only child, so I was somewhat independent, but ultimately, I think everybody deserves an opportunity to get a good start. And I think both those organizations really help. So I've done some work there. The other one that I've been supporting more locally, as I get older, I guess, ultimately is different homes for those in the final stages of life. Because kind of at the other end of the spectrum, I think it's important everybody in their final days has support. So those are kind of the specifics and non-specifics of the charities I support. But they're kind of I think what you do with your life is up to you. But everybody deserves a good fair start and a nice ending. So,
wow, that's fantastic. I'm glad to hear it, Shawn. I can't thank you enough for being on with me. There are a couple of moments in there I'm going to get with the team that are just absolute masterclasses in selling, and I hope folks pay attention to that, pluck them out, and work on the things that you offer them today. Thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Great to have me and have you and reconnect. It's been many years, so I appreciate the time and chance to catch up.
Ready to take your sales team or event to the next level? Visit franksomma.com to discover how Frank can coach your top performers, deliver a tailored workshop for your team, or captivate your audience with a content-packed keynote at your next event. Frank's best-selling book, B2B is really P2P, is now available on Amazon and Frank's website. Here's a special offer. As a valued listener, mention this podcast when you contact Frank and receive a 10% discount on your first coaching session, keynote, or workshop booking.
That's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Selling in the Age of AI. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to all of the topics we discussed, and of course, to connect with our amazing guests. I have to shout out big love to my production team, Neeks, Angelo, Nico of Digital Presence. You guys rock. If you want your digital presence to explode, check these guys out at digitalpresence.team. And until next time, remember, people can't point and click you. Be the difference maker for your prospects and clients.